If Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was here today, watching all the brothers and sisters divided on the sunnah he gave, he'd be screaming out to the ummah of this world saying you're to blame.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to Contemporary Islamic Issues. I'm your host, Arqam Rashid. This is a brand new series on Huda TV in which we will take various Islamic topics and concepts and discuss them in 30-minute segments with a contemporary outview and look. So I want to start off today's episode, which is about moderation in Islam. What is moderation? What does this term mean? And how does it apply to us today? So let's start off by welcoming and introducing our wonderful guest, Sheikh Asim Luqman Al-Hakim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah and jazakumullah khair for having me.
Sheikh, it's wonderful to have you from Saudi Arabia here recording with us at Huda TV. And it's, this is a wonderful opportunity to do this series with you, inshallah. So I want to start off by asking you, today's episode is about moderation. Can you just generally or briefly give us an idea of what moderation is in Islam?
See, the terminology of moderation can be interpreted or translated into wasatiyya, the middle path. And this is a universal trend. You always find the right wing and the left wing. Yes. Which means that there is something in the middle. Mm-hmm. And Allah Azza wa Jal has praised the Muslims by saying, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Allah has made the followers of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, our Prophet, to be a nation on the middle path. And this means that there are extremes. And the extremes are the edges of the a rod, if you would like to say, something to the far right and something to the far left. And the best of them is the thing that is in the middle. So moderation in Islam is the middle path.
And something very beautiful I read on this ayah that you quoted for us was that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the ayah, He says that He's made us in the middle so then we can judge others, shuhada ala nas, to be a witness for the rest of mankind. And it's very interesting because the middle path, it doesn't take sides. It doesn't, if you're to be a witness for what mankind is doing and to bring justice to mankind, you have to be adl, you have to be fair.
Correct.
And it's a very beautiful ayah that you quoted there. Now, many times in the West, especially in the West, and you can find it in many Muslim countries as well, we have this concept of, okay, I'm a moderate Muslim, right? I want to be a moderate Muslim. We don't need to take extremes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us to be moderate. You find many khatibs and many scholars saying we should be moderate in our views. But many times in the West we say, okay, well moderation is, why do I have to pray 5 times a day? Why do I have to fast 30 days? This is not moderation. Let's fast in moderation. Let's fast 5 days of the month. Let's pray how we want to pray. Why do we have to pray in a specific way? This is not moderation. What would you say to that?
See, if you look at the question as a question, it has 2 branches that can be, or angles that you can answer it through. Are we talking with Muslims or are we talking with non-Muslims? If I watch CNN or Fox News and them talking about moderate Islam and moderate Muslims, I immediately on the spot tell you that this has nothing to do with Islam. They're talking about a virgin that is not related to Islam at all. So is this my concern? Well, let's analyze. Moderation, or to be moderate, or to be tolerant, or to be in the middle is relative. It depends where are you looking at it from. They say that we live in the Middle East. How can it be Middle East except to those who think that they are in the right position? So they call it the Far East, the Middle East, and they think that they are the center of the whole of this universe, which tells you that their perspective is wrong. If I were to judge using my own logic and intellect, I would say to a woman from Saudi Arabia who wears full niqab and covers her face to be extreme. If I come to other Muslim countries where they do not cover the faces, they would look at Saudis as extreme and they would think that uncovering is okay. If you go to a little bit more moderate countries where women don't wear hijab at all, they'd look at these women who wear the hijab but don't cover their faces to be extreme. And if you go to the Muslims in the Western countries who don't have any boundaries in Islam, they go clubbing, partying, mixing, social drinkers, you know, it's a celebration, let's have a glass of champagne, I'm not gonna be wasted with that. So they think that all the other Muslims are extreme and they're the moderate. So you cannot judge things without having the right parameters. I cannot judge the length of my iPad if I don't have a ruler that gives me the right reading. So what is or what defines my readings? What is the thing that I can judge with? For the non-Muslims, we tell them it's a different issue when we talk to you, because you're not going to understand our language, so we have to talk in a language that you may understand. But for the Muslims who ask this question, we tell them, I'll ask you a question. Do you think that the Prophet ﷺ was moderate?
I mean, of course.
You cannot even blink and doubt. Definitely he was the moderate Muslim, because he's our benchmark. He's a role model in a sense that whatever he did is the right thing. No doubts at all in this. Now, if you acknowledge this, and this is every Muslim's conviction, though sometimes we have veils that prevent us from admitting it.
Yes.
So if you admit this fact, because if you don't admit it, you're not a Muslim anymore.
Yeah, of course.
So the Prophet is the role model, and he is the benchmark for moderation. This is what we judge issues with. So if I want to judge an issue of, let's assume I'm a sophisticated person. I go to the restaurant, I order a big T-bone steak, well done. And when I start eating it and cutting it, I'm using the fork with my left and the knife with my right. And I eat with my left. Akhi, this is haram. The Prophet told us, ﷺ, that the shaitan eats with his left and drinks with his left. You look at me and said, what do you know? Everybody's eating with his left. What's wrong with, why did Allah create two hands for us? You imbecile. Subhanallah. No, you're extremist. You're so strict, man. You're a fanatic.
You're not moderate.
Say, okay, you're a Muslim? Let's see what the Prophet said. And then you tell me what you think. If we look at things through this spectrum, through this angle, you have no problem with being moderate.
And just to recap, so basically moderation depends on which lens you look at, which lens you're looking through. So if you're looking through the lens of the West, then of course this is going to be a different culture, different society, different understanding of how to live your life. So our moderation is taken from the Quran and Sunnah, like you said, from the Prophet ﷺ. So now but
if I may add.
Sure, of course you can.
See, it's not only the lens of the West. Even among us Muslims, yeah, we have extremists. And this is why we have...
This is what I want to get into next.
Okay, then go ahead.
No, sure, but go ahead.
Akhi, in Islam, it is so clear and obvious. The Prophet said, تَرَكْتُكُمْ عَلَى الْمَحَجَّةِ الْبَيْضَاءِ. I have left you on a clear and white sheet, if you may. That the night is obvious, the day is obvious, it's so clear, no one doubts when the sun is in the middle of the sky that it might be night. So the Prophet ﷺ told us that he had given us, he has taught us everything. However, when you get these extremists, whether from the far right or from the far left, Islam has the answer to them, because they have understood the Quran and the Sunnah according to their desires and whims. So it's not only the West that has misconceptions about Islam and moderation, also those who claim to be Muslims. And they are a minority. Alhamdulillah, bringing them back to the mainstream of Islam is quite easy because the Quran is in black and white, it's in Arabic language, and the Hadith explains every single detail of it.
Okay, so now obviously you said in your question, in your answer, that there's two ways of looking at it. One is for Muslims, and one is obviously not for non-Muslims. Now let's get a little bit into this concept for Muslims. In Islam, we have what you said, wasata, the middle path, and then you have two extremes, which is one is extremism, which is terrorism or any sort of extremism and misinterpreting verses of the Quran. And on the other side, you have Muslims that can be also considered extreme because they're not part of the middle path, which is they leave everything that's part of Islam, that's part of the religion, that's part of the fundamentals of faith, we can say, such as prayer. This is a sort of extremism as well. So how can we figure out what is not extremism on both ends, whether it be this harsh sort of terrorism type of extremism, or whether it be the exact opposite end, which is, let's be moderate, let's leave everything, we don't need to do. How do we know, how do we find that balance, that middle path? How do we find it?
Alhamdulillah, the Prophet ﷺ had taught us everything, and he has set the foundations for having Islam last to the Day of Judgment. There is no religion after Islam, and there's no messenger after the Prophet ﷺ. Allah said 14 centuries ago, "Al-yawma akmaltu lakum dinakum." Today, I have completed your religion. So the religion is complete. No one can come and add things to it or subtract things from it. Those who are extremists, they would probably take one or two evidences, overlooking the rest of the evidences because it does not serve, they do not serve their whims and desires. So Islam is a full package that we have to take it as all and as a whole. Allah Azza wa Jal says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu udkhulu fis silmi kaffa," that enter in Islam wholeheartedly, in the whole thing, as a package, not being selective. So we have extremists in the sense that we have people who go beyond what Allah has legislated. And we have people on the other side of the coin who do not take the full thing. And they say, no, it's sufficient to do some part of it. And for example, in the issues of aqeedah, or the creed, you have Khawarij and you have Murji'ah. Both of them are opposite side of the equation, yet they share the same concept when it comes to the definition of Iman. Iman, they say that your belief is a whole unit. Either it's there or it's not there at all. It cannot be divided into levels and grades. So Khawarij say, you're a believer, you make a single major sin, you become a kafir, a disbeliever. The Murji'ah, on the other hand, say, you're a believer, it's a whole thing. Do whatever you want. You're still a believer.
So they're both picking and choosing.
Yes. So they say that Iman cannot be increased or decreased. The middle path are the people of Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, who say no. Iman increases with good deeds, decreases with bad deeds and sins. So this is the middle path. Where did these people or these folks got their idea from? From the Quran. Where did the other side get their ideas from? From the Quran. Yet, Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, said that when you argue with the peoples of whims and desires, do not argue with them strictly with the Quran, because Quran has many angles to look at from. Argue with them, debate with them with the Sunnah. The Sunnah is clear-cut and straightforward. So the way to answer these people on the extreme sides is to answer them with the Quran and the Sunnah as well.
Because as we know, the Sunnah clarifies the Quran for us and tells us exactly what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means in the Quran. Shaykh, I want to actually get into people exaggerating in their acts of worship, but before we do that, we're going to go for a short break, so stay tuned. Welcome back to Contemporary Islamic Issues on Huda TV. Now, before we went for that short break, we were speaking about moderation, and the Sheikh gave us a wonderful definition and gave us different outlooks on moderation. Now, we said that when we come back from this short break, we will speak about balance and speak about exaggerating yourself in acts of worship. So, Sheikh, I want to ask you, now, we said before the break, you spoke about the different people also taking their proofs from the Quran and, bits and pieces and following their desires and interpreting them in ways that they want to, rather than using the Sunnah to define what the Quran is telling us. There's also people who take certain acts of worship which are good, prayers, siyam, fasting, and many other acts of worship, and exaggerate in these acts of worship. So, for example, a person might take prayer and say, well, I'm going to start praying, either 10 times a day, or I'm going to fast all year long. So sometimes their intentions, you can say, are good in a way, but they're overburdening themselves. It's not what's prescribed for us in a way. So what would you say to that?
Again, burdening yourself and burning yourself to the ground with good deeds is dependent on the Sharia, on the Quran and the Sunnah. So if the Prophet tells us to make dhikr, and he gives us 100 times of dhikr, this is a lot to some. If the Prophet ﷺ recited every Fajr prayer of a Friday with Surah Al-Sajdah and Surah Al-Insan, which amounts to about 5 pages. A lot of the Muslims say, wow, this is too extreme if the Imam does it now. This is the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. This is the benchmark. So, no, it's not extreme. You are too lazy. So, in order for us to comment on it, we have to go back to the Sunnah. It's human nature that you want to excel. And when people look at Jannah and paradise and what Allah Azza wa Jal has prepared for them, and they compare it with their short lifespan, 70 years, 60 years, seldomly you'll find people going past that. So when you compare apple to apple, you say there's no comparison. So I'm going to work real hard to strive for the hereafter. But sometimes this is the biggest gate for Satan to enter from. And this is why the Prophet ﷺ always reiterated on taking the middle path. For example, we know in Hajj, in pilgrimage, we stone the 3 jamarat. Some people call them the great devil, the middle devil, and the
big shaitan.
This is all baseless. There's no devil in there. Sometimes you find some of them brothers holding like a big rock and throwing it and cursing the shaitan. He made me divorce my wife. He made me curse my father. What are you doing? Some of them even go there with his shoes, hitting it. Yeah, this is all nonsense, and shaitan is laughing his head off. The Prophet, in that beautiful ritual, said stone with 7 stones. And he instructed one of his companions to collect the stones for him. And he said, choose something like this, which is lesser than, what do you call it?
A pebble.
A pebble that is lesser in size than, bigger than size than a lentil, is it?
Yeah.
And smaller than bees. So something is really small.
Very small, yes.
And you just throw it normally. You don't harm people. So the Prophet is telling them, don't go to extreme and select something that is big. Even in Hajj, when you're traveling from one area to the other, he says, as-sakina as-sakina. You have to be in a state of tranquility. And don't think that righteousness is by speeding and by overtaking people. All of this is to tell us that Islam is a religion of moderation. He went once into a house and he saw a rope dangling from the ceiling. So he said, what is this? So they told him, this is for one of your wives. Whenever she prayed night prayer and felt tired, was unable to stand, she would force herself and hang with the rope so that she can stand. He said, subhanallah, do not burden yourself like this. And take from the deeds what you can tolerate and bear. Not only that, this incident was reported twice. Once with Abu Darda and Salman al-Farisi, may Allah be pleased with them, and once with Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As and the Prophet himself. And in both cases, Abu Darda and Abdullah ibn Amr ibn al-As both were so extreme in their forms of worship to the extent that they fasted every single day. And they prayed night prayer every single night. So they did not have any desire to their spouses, which reached the Prophet ﷺ in the incident of Abdullah ibn Amr, and reached Salman al-Farisi, who was a brother of Abu Darda, by the Prophet ﷺ, made them brothers. So they both said the same thing. The Prophet said ﷺ, and Salman said it, and the Prophet approved what Salman said. The advice was, your Lord has rights over you. Your spouse has rights over you. Your guest has rights over you. And your body, your health, has rights over you. So give each one its due right. This is the balance. This is the moderation. So don't go to extreme, thinking that I can be the best athlete, for example, but this would compromise my religious duties, my social obligations, and it would compromise my financial status, unless I'm a soccer player. Then I would hit it real good. I could be the best businessman, make a lot of money, but I would compromise the other rights. I can be the greatest monk and scholar of Islam, spending 24/7 my time in a masjid, but I wouldn't see my children or family, and I wouldn't have any quality time. I wouldn't be able to earn money, and then I start begging people, and I would not take good care of my health, high cholesterol levels, blood pressure, diabetes, etc., the whole 9 yards. So Islam gave us the equation of being balanced, being moderate, and the happiest man on earth, in my opinion, is the one who strikes this balance.
Yeah, and just from that hadith that you quoted about giving each individual their rights, from there we can take so many benefits. I mean, you know, you have people always wondering, well, I don't have time to pray because I have to, you know, give time to my wife, or I have to give time to my work. But each thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to give it its full and due rights. And another really interesting thing is that many times we say that Islam is not just worship, but it's a way of life. And this is commonly quoted. And you know, this is one beautiful way of expressing it, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has His rights, you give Him His rights, which is worshipping Him. But that's not the only way you worship. Islamic worship is not through ritualistic things only. I mean, when you give your wife her rights, when you give your neighbor their rights, when you give your kids their rights, this is worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and this is conducting your way of life. That's why Islam is the way of life. It's not just an act of worship. Another thing I wanted to find out was, how can we achieve this moderation? I mean, why wouldn't I be trapped in the same situation as these people that are selecting and choosing? If I open the Quran and I don't understand it, how can I find this moderation? I want to look for this moderation that the Prophet ﷺ spoke for. Who do I look for? Who do I listen to? I mean, there's people quoting ayahs here, there's people quoting ayahs here, there's people quoting ayahs here. How do I know which one is the moderate one?
Okay, before I go into this, you said a sentence in the beginning, but you rectified it, which is good. You said Islam is not only worship, it is a way of life.
Yes.
And this is wrong. Because Allah says, وَمَا خَلَقْتُ الْجِنَّ وَالْإِنسِ إِلَّا لِيَعْبُدُونَ I have not created the humans and the jinn except to worship me. Yeah. So the sole purpose of our creation is to worship Allah Azza wa Jal. However, our understanding of worship is wrong. Because as you've rectified it, you said that people think that worshiping Allah is only in prayers and fasting. And that's it. No. Worshiping Allah Azza wa Jal is in every single thing you do. It's in your politics, it's in your finance, it's in your arts, it's in your social life.
It is your way of life.
It is a way of life, but it is under the umbrella of worship. So even if I drink a cup of coffee If my intention is to get stronger and to wake up so I can pray night prayer, then this drinking of a cup of coffee becomes worship. If I'm having intimacy with my wife, this is a form of worship, because if I do it with other than my wife, I'll be sinful for that and I'll go to hell. So Allah Azza wa Jalla is even rewarding us on permissible things, things that we desire, depending on the mindset we are in. Now, how would we reach this moderation, or what are the means of doing it? This requires like a couple of episodes to know how to select the scholar to follow. It is totally correct, the observation you made. And that is, nowadays I open the internet and it's an endless ocean of information. Even Sheikh Google now is a grand mufti. Now he's not a sheikh now, he's been promoted. Yes, we went past this level. And this is a problem. It's a blessing and it's a menace at the same time. It's a blessing for those who can utilize this technology into serving Islam. In so many places and times, I need to find a certain piece of information or an evidence for an issue. I can find it in a jiffy, because alhamdulillah, I know, I've studied it, I have knowledge. Those who do not know will be confused. And then this is, again, a smaller gate for shaitan to enter from. Because then he comes to individuals and say, oh, alhamdulillah, there are 15 different opinions. So pick and choose. Let's do what they call cherry picking. Moderation is reached only through knowledge. And this is why Allah Azza wa Jal isolated the fear of Allah in those who are knowledgeable. إِنَّمَا يَخْشَى اللَّهَ مِنْ عِبَادِهِ الْعُلَمَاء. That verily only the scholars fear Allah truly. So the real scholars, their knowledge gives them fear of Allah, gives them righteousness, gives them piety. But if you don't have knowledge, then the sky is the limit to go astray. And this is why Ali ibn Abi Talib, may Allah be pleased with him, he said there are two groups that have gone astray in me. Those who are extremists in my love, referring to the Shia, and those who are extremists in my hatred, referring to Khawarij, who eventually killed him, assassinated him. So these two things show you that without knowledge, you are in the middle of New York City without Google Maps. You'll be lost. It's a jungle out there. You need knowledge. You need your GPS to guide you to paradise. And your GPS in common contemporary language is the Quran and the Sunnah. These are the guides. These are the light that guide you to moderation.
And it's very interesting how everything in Islam is connected. I mean, you've mentioned that knowledge is what gives you that moderation, and there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ where he says it's compulsory for everybody to seek knowledge. And obviously the scholars have said that this hadith means enough knowledge for what they need. So if this person's a businessman, he should know how to conduct his business Islamically. He needs to pray. Everything that he needs to know, he has to learn, and it's compulsory for him to do so.
Umar used to go to the market with a stick, and he was the caliph, he's a ruler. And anyone who does not have knowledge in transactions, he would kick him out of the souk. He said, do not corrupt our souk, because you don't know about riba, you don't know about dhulm, you don't know about gharar, and you come and sell and buy without knowledge, all the transactions would be haram.
And this, to reach this moderation, we need to seek knowledge. We need to educate ourselves about how the Prophet ﷺ conducted moderation and how he established moderation. And the only way we can do it is we need to leave our own views. Sometimes we're stuck in this view, like if I'm from the West, I have this view of, okay, this is moderation, because I'm looking through that lens that you mentioned. Each place has its own lens.
Correct.
So just like the West thinks the Far East is Japan and China, Japan and China, they don't call themselves the Far East.
Correct.
It's not Far East to them. So we need to, detach this sort of understanding that we already have and try to look at the Quran and Sunnah from the view of the Prophet ﷺ. How did his companions view it? How did the early Salaf view the Quran and the Sunnah, and how they use this moderation? Shaykh, I'm just going to give you a minute to give us a conclusion or wrap it up, inshallah, and then we're going to come to the end of this episode.
Again, to reach the level of moderation and to know whether you're moderate or not, you have to display all of your life, your actions on the Quran and the Sunnah. 3 of the Prophet's companions, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may Allah be pleased with them, went to the houses of the Prophets, asking his wives about the forms of worship that the Prophet offered, alayhi salatu wasalam. And when they told him, they said, no, this is too little. The Prophet has been forgiven all of his sins. I'm personally going to pray all night without sleeping. The other one said, personally, I will fast the whole year without breaking my fast. The third one said, I will not get close to women. No intimacy. All of this as forms of worship to Allah Azza wa Jal. The Prophet was outraged when he heard this. And he said, alayhi salam, I pray and I sleep. I fast and I break my fast. And I marry women. Whoever seeks other than my sunnah, other than my way, he's not from me.
SubhanAllah, what a wonderful way to conclude the program with that beautiful hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. So Shaykh Hassan, I want to thank you for joining me for this episode. It was wonderful having this conversation with you once again. Thank you very much.
Jazakallah khair.
Dear viewers, I hope you guys benefited from this wonderful episode, and I hope you guys join us for many more episodes of contemporary Islamic issues. And until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
If Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam was here today, watching all the brothers and sisters divided on the sunnah he gave, he'd be screaming out to the ummah of this world, saying you're to blame. Return to the guidance of Allah that will set you free.